There we go, and we're off.
Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Julia Lawrence Chant, and I work in cohesive communities. What's a cohesive community? It's a community that really wants to be more decentralized. It wants to be making more of its own decisions about how it uses its resources and its power. And in any cohesive community, whether it's spiritual or permaculture or totally off grid, we still have to discuss the issue of the economic power of that community, because not only is knowledge power, but economic power is required to affect change. Today, I've got the pleasure to interview Toshi. Toshi is an expert in all things monetary, financial, and economic. And one of his raison d'etre is to be able to pass on this knowledge to the layperson, to the man on the street, so they actually understand how the economic and financial system has worked, is working, and the things that they can do to bring about economic change. So it's about educating, because when we can educate others, it enables them to take action. So today the topic is money. So, Toshi, we're going to start off with the very first basic question of what is money?
Yeah, thanks for that, Julia. So, very simply, the word money is an amalgamation of two words, which is a monopoly commodity. So, when a because a medium of exchange is a tool that enables, encourages, and accelerates the facilitation of trade, it's actually economically competitive. So that means that eventually there will only be one. And as Henry Kissinger said, who controls money controls the world. So what happens is when a commodity monopolizes a market due to its ability to be used as a medium of exchange, it becomes a monopoly commodity and recognized as money. So that's what money is. Money is a monopoly commodity. And just
Okay.
as J.P. Morgan said, gold is money, everything else is credit.
So that's a very detailed explanation. And I like the basic one of money being a monopoly commodity.
Mm-hmm.
It takes back to those days in our childhood where we played the game Monopoly. So it's always good to know where these words come from. You've also given us quotes from Henry Kissinger
Mm-hmm.
about how money is used to control the world,
Mm-hmm.
and also the bankers. So that kind of leads us quite nicely into the next question, which is why is it important to understand money now? Because I think more and more people are realizing that something is either a bit off or very off with what's happening with our banking system. Even if you've noticed the small print in the emails you get about the bail ins, July 2021, Rishi Sunak talked about bail ins. What are bail ins? They are the opposites of bailouts. We had a bailout in the financial crisis of 2008, where the governments bailed out the banks using taxpayers' money. What bail ins mean is it'll be the people with money in their own individual bank accounts who will bail in the banks. So these are all things that are being talked about now in certain areas, arenas. So I'd like you to confirm, explain in more detail why it is important to understand money now.
Yeah, so what's really important about understanding money now is that the complete quote of Henry Kissinger was who controls the food supply controls the people, who controls the energy can control whole continents, and who controls money can control the world. And so indirectly, what he's doing is telling us the order in which they're doing things, because once you've got control of the money supply, everything else just falls into place. So what they're doing is they're going for control of the money, then they're going to go for the energy companies and utilities, and then they're going to go for the food supply and the farmers. That's it. So everything's and getting control of the energy companies. Again, they're just corporate entities, so you can just purchase them, and again, you can squeeze the farmers to the point where they have to sell because they've got control of the money system, and so they've spent hundreds of years getting control of the money system. And again, this was the entire point of World War II, was to drain the European countries of the gold reserves, while the American corporations supplied both sides. So people think that Hitler was able to pull off an economic miracle. And the reason they call it a miracle is because they just don't want people to ask questions. And there are no answers because nobody's telling them what really happened. Hitler was just simply funded by the American corporations to instigate a war in Europe while they supplied both sides, and both sides were playing for their defences in gold. So 1944, the American corporations pointed out to the European countries, by the way, you now no longer have enough gold in your banks to back the amount of currency you have in circulation. So your currencies are going to have to be backed by our currencies, and it's our currency that's going to be backed by gold because we've got it all. And then just a few years later, Nixon shock, 15th of August 1971, they said, the gold we promised you, you're not getting it. But because nobody was using gold as a medium of exchange, nobody really saw it. And so the real changes are what happened behind the scenes. So people just simply carried on as normal, but those who had the ability to print and create currency from nothing just went on an absolute blitz, an absolute bender, just printing currency left, right and centre, getting hold of all the resources that they could. And again, what they did with when they got Hitler out of the way, because it's no coincidence that the Bretton Woods Agreement was agreed to in 1944, and then all they did is stop supplying Hitler, and the war finished in 1945. That was it. So I lost my train.
Can I just stop you there, because I think a lot of what you've gone through, it might shock some people, it might not. People who've been down the rabbit hole, particularly anybody who's really into the financial system, as I am, will know about the Bretton Woods Agreement. Many will not. Many won't actually understand about what a gold-backed currency is. How, and we were talking about this earlier, what we'll do with a lot of the information that you're sharing today, we'll put it in some kind of Word document that people have got access to so they can go back and look over the notes, because there's a lot of information coming out. If we look at what's happening at the moment in the country I live in, which is France, where people are literally taking to the streets because they know that something is wrong in terms of the access to basic food supplies, the cost of energy, and the fact that it's not a gold-backed nation. Where do you see this going in terms of people waking up to the fact that the Western nations are not gold-backed, and why that's important compared to, for example, the likes of the BRIC nations, which basically do have a good supply of gold reserves, and the impact that that's going to have geopolitically? Because we're right in that now. We're right in that phase now. It's happening to be seen.
So really we just need a new commodity in order to use as a medium of exchange. That's it. And the reason we need to use a commodity is because a commodity has market value due to its usefulness. So if something is useful, it's valuable. If something is useless, it's worthless. It's that simple. So
a good commodity is something like fresh water, vegetables, products to get your car going when it won't go because the garage has gone kaput. Things that sustain a basic lifestyle. Herbal remedies because you can't get to the pharmacy. The things that sustain life itself are the best commodities to have because that's the market value to sustain life. Am I going back to basics here?
Yeah. So that's the word that you're using there, which is correct, is value. We need a way to exchange value. So what the bankers have done is just simply made money worthless. And if money is worthless, it's basic economics in that if something's worthless, the more you create of it, the less valuable it becomes against the costs of goods and services. So currency being backed by nothing, fiat currency, just simply means that the more there is in the economy, chasing the same amount of goods and services. So you print more currency, which devalues it comparatively in unit measurements. So the cost of goods and services goes up as the value of currency goes down. The more they print. So
most people will think of currency in terms of the difference between the dollar, the euro, sterling. And what's interesting at the moment with those three fiat currencies is that they're very much on a parity. Okay, so that's interesting in itself. And when you haven't got a currency which has value or is worthless, that's when you have hyperinflation, as happened in the Weimar Republic. So is that what we're heading to, or is that what we're on the precipice of?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they've done it on purpose. I mean, if you go back, they call it the M1 money stock, which is the amount of US dollar in circulation. And what's absolutely insane is that the European countries, as most countries, their currencies, due to the Bretton Woods Agreement, are backed by the value of the US dollar. So they're holding US dollars as their reserve asset for their own currency. So the more the US print of US dollar, the less valuable the dollar becomes, and the less dollar value these other currencies have that use it as a reserve asset. It's nuts. So the more the dollar declines in value, the more everything else declines in value. And unless you can print that dollar, you're going to be in shit. Those who can print it can just print their way out of anything.
So in terms of many people listening to this, they'll be asking themselves, what can we do? I mean, I think a lot of people who are awake know that there's going to be some kind of collapse of the financial system. Some people are getting gold coins, silver coins. They're also stocking up to make sure they've got a good supply of food. I mean, I work in my community in France in the gift economy, so we are already bartering, one amongst the other. We're using all of our skills and talents in what we have, mainly vegetables, herbal remedies, healing modalities. So some people are already doing that, but it needs to be much more cohesive and joined up. And I think many people now need to come together in various communities and networks to make themselves as creating their own value, because if we have a time when there is no currency to trade, we're going to have to go back to basics. So the security that we've got is the very food that we can grow, and the skills to help others to maintain basic living, basic life is literally going to be our money supply until this is resolved. How do you think it's going to be resolved? How do you think that we, the people, are going to take back our economic power?
Good question. Relatively detailed answer required, but I'll try and summarize it. So it's money that allows the mobilization of resources, and we need to start exchanging value. Now, if we just go back to bartering, herbal remedies with for food and whatever else we've got, that's all well and good, but that traps us into our local communities, which is what they want anyway, because there's no ability to trade outside of the local community. And some communities might have a local community currency, but it has no value outside of their local community. So this is where we really need value. And value has to be a money. And it's like this. We either have a common money used by the people to then create government that works for the people, or government will create money to control the people. That is literally the only options available to us, which is why this knowledge that I have on the most valuable commodity on earth is I'm so desperate to educate people on. But it's tricky, but hopefully we'll get through that in this interview.
Well, I think it's very interesting that you talk about we need to create the common money. So if we're going grassroots up, that common money, let's call it the people's money, also goes towards the creation of a new, let's just call it governance system, because I think the word politics has become synonymous with corruption, that we want governance structures which actually allow for the right kind of decision making locally, but that can also be applied at some then national and international levels. But we've got to start small with a common money, and then a common law or a common judicial system. We'll keep the word common, which actually goes back to more fair shares and equity and equality for all, rather than the top-down hierarchical system where we've got a huge division now between rich and poor. I mean, everybody's very much aware that the whole erosion of the middle classes has happened, and we have huge levels of poverty now. Okay, is there anything else you want to say about describing? I think we definitely need to take this interview and put it together as a flyer so that people can actually really go a bit deeper or take some time to digest what's been said, because it is like a teaching module, this, on what is money, what is currency, what is commodity, what is security. I know that you've already done some videos that people can have access to, but this is a good starting point as a first share. So I'd like to thank you for what we've covered. We've covered a lot.
Well, it's just there's still a lot that I need to explain just quickly. So you know how you mentioned the word common.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, common law is common sense in society. Commodity is common sense in economics. But it's just that nobody even knows what a commodity is. So that's really important. So I'll start with that.
Okay.
So just to sort of break it down, there are only 4 things that circulate within an economy. So it's really not it's not a lot to remember. You've got goods, services, securities, and commodities. So a medium of exchange has to be one of those 4 things. So let's just do a process of elimination. So a common medium of exchange can't be a good, because goods are manufactured by centralized businesses. A common medium of exchange can't be a service, because services are provided and they can't be transported. Securities are just simply certified, secured entitlement. So for anything that you can't prove or take possession of, you need a security for. So the security would be issued by a higher authority in the form of a certificate. That's why I say certified. So you have a certificate proving your ownership of that item. So that would be something like share ownership or land, something that you can't take possession of within your own home, effectively. So a security is issued by a higher authority. And if that security, which can either be in the form of a certificate or a token or something like that, does not represent anything, then that is securities fraud, because it's not securing you to anything. People have spun you a yarn, told you a story, and said, "Oh yeah, you want to buy this. This secures your entitlement to that," and then it doesn't. That is securities fraud, as defined by the US Supreme Court in the SEC versus W.J. Howico 1946, which is what makes all fiat currency securities fraud, because it represents nothing. So that means the only thing we have left that can be used as a common medium of exchange is a commodity. So let's break that word down. The word commodity is an amalgamation of three words. It is something that's common, that has then been itemized and then uniquely identified. So the word common just simply means that there is no human barrier to entry. So in other words, it is just simply extracted or grown. That's all it can be. Now, money cannot be something that's grown, because people would just simply grow as much money as they could and it would be worthless. So therefore, money has to be a commodity that is extracted. And it also has to be fixed in supply so that no one can alter it. So nobody can inflate it, nobody can deflate it. It has to be fixed and at the same time divisible amongst everybody in the economy. So the most perfect money would be something that would be effectively infinitely divisible. Now, what is infinitely divisible is digital data, because you can just simply keep dividing it. It would make the perfect money if you could somehow commoditize data. So the process of commoditization is just simply a process of standardization in order to give something economic value, so that it can then be measured against the value of other goods and services in the economy and used as an effective medium of exchange. So let's take oil, for example. Oil is commoditized or standardized through barrels. It's sold in barrels. Coffee is sold in weight. Gold is sold in weight. So all it is something that's common that's then been itemized. So let's take coffee. If you itemize coffee, it means you bag it, and then you uniquely identify that bag or uniquely identify that barrel of oil, and then that can then be used as a medium of exchange. And that's effectively what we need to go back to. And value at the moment is measured in terms of dollars, pounds, yen, sort of fiat currencies. So in the same way that if I was to say to you, look, I have a kilogram, that it doesn't make sense. You'd be like, well, you've got a kilogram of what? What do you have a kilogram of? You can't just say you've got a kilogram. And that's the same with value. So at the moment, people are saying, oh, I've got £10, I've got $10, I've got €10. Well, what people, this is the fraud that's being perpetrated on us. It's like, okay, you've got £10 of value. So what do you have £10 worth of value of? So at the moment, people are saying, oh, I've got £10. Well, you've got £10 of nothing. What do you have £10 of? That's the fraud that they have, hoodwinked us on. So what gives something value is its usefulness. So the most valuable commodity on Earth will just simply be the most useful thing on Earth. And this is where I'm going to try and explain Bitcoin and blockchain. So the process of blockchain is just simply a way of making data immutable so that it can't be deleted. And if you can make data that can't be deleted, it means that you can then commoditize it. And the way you commoditize it is by creating a fixed supply of data that cannot be deleted. And
I'm going to stop you here, because if I want to ask this question, there'll be some other people in the audience who want to ask the question as well. You've talked about Henry Kissinger's quote about the money supply, the energy. Well, energy enables the exchange of digital information over the internet. If basically the energy system goes down, how are we going to be able to exchange that digital data? If basically they cut the energy supply so that we're without our mobile phones, we're without our laptops, how can we actually do that? That's just a practical question that I might have kind of, it's all very obvious. But if that goes and we really are back to kind of sort of basics, how are we going to use that, that digital system?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So let's talk about this transfer of energy first of all. So that energy, the transfer of energy would first of all somehow have to be recorded. And it has to be recorded on something that is immutable. So this is where immutable data trumps absolutely everything, because the unit of energy, whatever it is that you're selling, the record of it just simply wouldn't be there if somebody could control that record keeping. So what Bitcoin is a globally distributed, economically competitive ledger. And that means that each of those, I'm going to call them nodes, or other people call them mining operations, have their own often independent energy source to keep them running. And the reason they have an incentive to make sure they keep themselves running is because the system is economically competitive. So if they go down, it benefits someone else. So all the nodes, the mining operations, do all they can to keep their energy source safe. So that's why they're either using solar power or hydroelectric or geothermal. There's numerous ways. And in fact, one of the what the powers that be have hidden from us is actually free energy, and the knowledge of free energy is just simply starting to come out. People have known about it, like they've mentioned Tesla's energy from the ether. They've also mentioned creating energy from water with hydrogen. So these are all the technologies that the powers that be have hidden from us, and they are just coming to fruition.
If we as the people have a different source of energy to run our computers, our blockchain, literally, which is decentralized, that's going to help us create a more value-based system, surely. So it's almost like, what's going to come first with all of this? As the systems come crashing down, is it that some of the BRICS nations, actually, because they're going to be out of the petrodollar, are really going to be the nations that are going to be in advance of us in the West in terms of creating these new systems using literally the distribution networks that you've described? Because it feels that we're some way behind in the West. That's my gut feel.
Yes. So, and again, this is why I'm sort of trying to explain the value of data. It's Bitcoin is quite literally the most perfect money. In fact, sometimes I have to pinch myself that somebody could actually have come up with this. It's just sensational. So it's a way of making light energy valuable, because that's what digital is. Digital is just simply bits of light. So it's as fast and as efficient as light. And so effectively what you're doing is commoditizing light. It's sensational. And when you commoditize light, or bits of data, in order for it to be commoditized, it has to be common, which means there is no central point of authority, control, influence, or failure. So when you are using this commodity ledger, this commodity data network, you own and control your own data. And at the moment, the reason the powers that be have got control over us is because they have the data. They are data scraping. Literally everything about us at the moment is being uploaded onto a corporate server somewhere, which they own and control. And this is why they don't want people understanding or knowing how, or knowing what Bitcoin is actually used for and what it can be used for. Because Bitcoin is effectively the world's first ever commercial internet. So when you upload things onto the Bitcoin network in the way that you would upload things onto the internet, you just simply pay for the upload with Bitcoin, and that data is yours because it's uploaded onto a globally distributed, economically competitive, distributed ledger. So the only person who knows that they've uploaded it is you. And therefore, if you upload that data, you control that data, you can then sell that data. So if you upload a song or a movie or a podcast or a book or financial transactions, anything like that, that is yours. And it cannot be cracked, hacked, altered, changed or deleted or seen. Because all the data is uploaded and scrambled by SHA-256, which is currently the same secure hashing algorithm that secures the internet. So nobody can break it. So all the data you upload onto the Bitcoin network is yours. And again, this is the how the powers that be have got control of this is because they initially started record keeping in the 1500s. And so they started recording births. But again, sleight of hand, what they did is they changed that record to a register without telling us. So we think we are recording a birth, and they're like, no, what you're doing is you're registering a birth. So this is, again, I mean, it's outrageous what they've done. So when you register your newborn onto the government's, registrar, what you are doing is you are handing over, registering ownership of your newborn, handing it over to them effectively. And that's when your newborn becomes a child, because a child is chattel. It's chattel of the state. And what happens is when you register your child with the state, a trust is then created that's purpose was to pay for everything that child would need. So literally food, water, shelter, education, energy, everything. And that's called the Sesquiv Trust. Now, because that trust is meant to pay for everything, when the mother and father start paying for the child, when actually everything is already paid for, what they're doing is they're effectively renting that child from the state. They are paying rent by paying for its upkeep because the upkeep is already paid for by its trust. And that's when the mother and the father become parents. They're renting their chattel, their child, from the state because they have registered it with them. Whereas now what we can do is we can record our newborn's birth on the Bitcoin ledger. And the Bitcoin ledger is an immutable evidence trail of truth. And that's why the authorities don't want it, because we need to start using it to record things. Whereas at the moment, the official record is now a register and owned by the state. And we're all using it. And they're just like, great, well, now we've got, now you're, handing, creating a contract with us and handing over ownership of all your possessions. And again, this is what they do with the land register, and property and everything. What we are doing right now is registering everything with the state, and the state is now a corporation. So we are literally handing over possession of everything we own to a corporation when we register it. It's outrageous. And this is why we need to start using the Bitcoin ledger to record things. If that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So I think that we need time for a pause because I feel that the next podcast we will do is to really explore the Bitcoin ledger in more detail, because you've given us a really good summary and a backdrop to the history of how we've ended up here at this moment in time. And that's quite a lot for people to digest, even if they're up to speed with many other of the things that have been happening around us for the last 3-4 years. I mean, obviously, this has been going on for centuries. But to integrate all that you've talked about is quite a lot. So fascinating as it is and important as it is. So I'd like to have a pause now and do a next conversation with you, literally about the Bitcoin ledger, because I think then people would really want to know how they can utilize that, how they can get on board with it, because that's the thing that's going to bring about the big change, the big economic power change. So let's have a little pause and then pick this up again. And I've got some homework to do to turn some of this stuff into a clear flyer or learning module for those people out there who want to do their homework. There's a lot to absorb, but thank you, Toshi, and it's fascinating, but necessary. We really need this knowledge now, because knowledge is our power, and we've got to give the knowledge back to the people, so that we're going to be rising grassroots up.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
There we go.